The cold air of the arena seemed to hum with tension, a thick silence settling over the gathered crowd. Alien spectators, a blend of species from across the galaxy, filled the stadium's tiered seats, their eyes fixed on the central platform where the competition would soon begin. Hovering above the crowd, a massive holographic screen displayed the roster of competitors. At the top, bold and bright, was the name that everyone knew, Zarek, the galaxy's top marksman. His reputation was unmatched, his accuracy legendary, and his arrogance palpable. On the platform, Zarek stood tall and confident, his multi-eyed face scanning the audience. His forearms moved with a fluid grace as he adjusted his advanced sniper rifle, a sleek piece of technology bristling with sensors and scopes. The crowd cheered as he raised one arm in acknowledgement, the display of confidence eliciting a wave of excited chatter. Amid the noise, a lone figure stepped onto the platform's edge, drawing little attention. Corporal Jane Carter, the human entrant, quietly set down her gear, a modest, well-worn rifle. She adjusted her cap, pulling it low over her eyes to shield them from the bright arena lights. Her movements were calm and deliberate, in stark contrast to the flamboyant gestures of the other competitors. Whispers and snickers spread through the crowd as they noticed her antiquated equipment. "Is that a museum piece?" a nearby alien spectator murmured, leaning toward its companion. "Did humans run out of their budget?" Zarek's ears twitched, picking up the laughter. He turned to Jane with a smirk. "You come here with that?" he taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. "This isn't a history lesson, human. It's a contest for the best." Jane met his gaze steadily, her expression unreadable. "We'll see who's the best soon enough," she replied evenly, her voice carrying just enough to be heard over the ambient noise. A loud gong signaled the start of the competition, and the crowd hushed in anticipation. The targets, distant and barely visible to the naked eye, were projected onto the holographic screen. They shimmered and shifted, simulating conditions that would challenge even the most skilled marksman: high winds, variable light, and sudden obstructions. Zarek went first. With the smooth precision of a practiced veteran, he lined up his shot, his rifle humming as it calculated the perfect trajectory. He pulled the trigger, and a brilliant beam of light streaked across the arena, hitting the target dead center. The crowd erupted in applause, the cheers echoing off the stadium walls. Jane was up next. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every skeptical eye on her. Ignoring the technological enhancements that her competitors relied upon, she focused on her senses. She felt the cool breeze brush against her skin, watched the subtle sway of distant flags, and listened to the faint whispers of the wind. She adjusted her rifle slightly and fired. A collective gasp rippled through the audience as her shot hit the target just millimeters off-center from Zarek's. The commentator, an alien with a booming voice, exclaimed, "An impressive shot from the human! But can she keep up without advanced tech?" The competition continued, each round increasing in difficulty. Zarek continued to rely on his advanced equipment, his shots never straying far from the center. But with each new challenge, Jane's focus sharpened. Her shots, while less flashy, consistently found their mark, sometimes even surpassing Zarek's. The laughter that had greeted her entrance began to fade, replaced by murmurs of surprise and begrudging admiration. By the fifth round, the atmosphere had shifted. The crowd watched with bated breath as Jane lined up her next shot. This target was nearly impossible, a small, fast-moving object darting through a field of obstacles. Zarek's shot missed by a hair's breadth, his frustration evident in the twitch of his ears and the tightness of his grip on the rifle. Jane exhaled slowly, her mind clear. She let her instincts guide her, pulling the trigger with a calm precision. The bullet raced through the maze of obstacles, striking the target squarely. The arena erupted into cheers and applause, a mix of shock and admiration filling the air. Zarek's confidence wavered, his composure cracking under the weight of this unexpected challenge. He glanced at Jane, who remained poised and steady, her eyes still fixed on the distant target field. "Who are you?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. Jane turned to face him, a small, determined smile playing at her lips. "Just a soldier doing her job," she said softly, her words barely audible over the noise of the crowd. The final round approached, a head-to-head challenge that would decide the winner. The targets were set at extreme distances, nearly invisible against the horizon. The wind picked up, howling through the arena, adding a new level of difficulty. Zarek, visibly tense now, took his shot. The beam of light cut through the air, but the gusts of wind threw it slightly off course. His shot landed just shy of the target's center. The crowd murmured, sensing his faltering confidence. Jane stepped forward, her face calm but focused. She adjusted her stance, feeling the wind's rhythm, reading the air like a seasoned sailor reads the waves. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them, her gaze steely and unwavering. She fired. The bullet sliced through the wind, cutting a perfect path to the target's heart. The crowd fell silent for a split second before erupting into thunderous applause. Jane lowered her rifle, a quiet pride settling over her as she turned to face Zarek. "For all your tech, you forgot the basics," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Sometimes, it's not about what you have but what you know." Zarek stared at her, his expression a mix of frustration and reluctant respect. The arena lights dimmed, marking the end of the competition, but the lessons learned today would linger far longer in the minds of those who witnessed the day a human sniper proved her worth. The crowd's cheers faded into the night, but the memory of Jane's shots, precise and unwavering, would echo throughout the galaxy. The arena's atmosphere buzzed with excitement, a palpable shift in the crowd's energy after Jane Carter's unexpected triumph in the first round. The spectators, once skeptical and dismissive, now watched her with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect. Whispers of her skill spread through the stands, each retelling adding a layer of intrigue. Jane, however, remained unfazed by the attention, her focus solely on the challenges ahead. As the holographic screen flashed the details for the next round, a hush fell over the audience. The targets this time were dynamic, small drones equipped with evasive maneuvers, darting in erratic patterns across the expansive arena. The challenge was clear: precision was not enough, adaptability would be the key to success. Zarek's frustration was evident. His earlier confidence had been shaken, and he now realized that he had underestimated his human competitor. He clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing as he reviewed the settings on his rifle, recalibrating for the unpredictable targets. Meanwhile, Jane calmly examined her own weapon, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. A nearby competitor, a reptilian alien named Trax, approached Jane with a curious glint in his eye. "You're quite the shot," he said, his voice a low hiss. "What did you learn to shoot like that?" Jane glanced up, meeting his gaze briefly before returning her attention to her rifle. "Back on Earth," she replied simply. "In places where you don't get second chances." Trax nodded, sensing the weight behind her words. "Well, let's see if you can keep up," he said, a hint of challenge in his tone. The second round commenced with a sharp beep, the drones springing to life in a flurry of erratic movements. Zarek took his position, his rifle tracking the closest drone with mechanical precision. He fired a burst of shots, his advanced targeting system adjusting in real time, and scored a hit. The crowd cheered, though the enthusiasm was more tempered than before. Jane stepped up, her stance relaxed but ready. She watched the drones for a moment, observing their patterns, the subtle rhythms in their movements. Her fingers flexed around the rifle's grip as she took aim, her breath steady and measured. She fired, and with each shot a drone fell from the sky, her timing impeccable. The audience gasped in unison as she continued to score hit after hit, her precision seemingly effortless. Zarek's expression darkened. He fired again, but his shots, while still accurate, lacked the fluid grace that Jane's possessed. He was fighting against the drones, while Jane seemed to dance with them, anticipating their moves as if in sync with their erratic paths. With each drone that fell, the tension in the arena grew. Jane's focus was unwavering, her mind locked onto the task at hand. She moved with an almost predatory grace, her eyes sharp and alert, never losing sight of her targets. The last drone twisted and turned, trying to evade her aim, but she remained patient, waiting for the perfect moment. When it came, her shot was clean and decisive, the drone dropping with a final, sputtering whine. A stunned silence fell over the crowd before erupting into applause, louder and more fervent than before. Jane lowered her rifle, exhaling slowly, her expression as calm and composed as it had been at the start. She glanced at Zarek, who was staring at her with a mix of disbelief and begrudging admiration. "You're not just lucky," Zarek said, his voice tight with restrained anger. "You've got skill. I'll give you that." Jane nodded, acknowledging the backhanded compliment without a word. She could sense the frustration simmering beneath his composed exterior. Zarek was a warrior, accustomed to victory, and his pride had been wounded. But Jane knew better than to underestimate a wounded opponent. The arena's holographic screen flickered again, displaying the results of the round. Jane's name had climbed to the top of the leaderboard, overtaking Zarek by a narrow margin. The final round loomed ahead, a sudden death challenge that would push both competitors to their limits. As the audience settled back into their seats, anticipation hung in the air like a storm cloud. The final round would determine not just the winner, but the true measure of skill and adaptability under pressure. Jane could feel the weight of every gaze on her, the eyes of a galaxy now focused on the lone human who had defied expectations. Zarek moved closer, his voice low so only Jane could hear. "You've made this interesting, human. But don't think for a second that I'm out of tricks." Jane met his gaze steadily, her expression unreadable. "Neither am I," she replied, her voice calm but firm. The tension between them crackled like static, a silent challenge exchanged in the brief moment before the final round began. Both knew that whatever happened next, it would be a test of not just skill, but of willpower, strategy, and the ability to adapt under the most extreme conditions. The announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers, signaling the start of the final round. The arena lights dimmed, casting long shadows across the platform. Jane took her position, her body steady, her mind clear. This was it, the moment where everything would be decided. The challenge was set, an impossible shot, through multiple moving barriers, in near darkness, with the wind howling through the arena. Zarek's rifle glowed softly as it calibrated for the shot, while Jane, her hands steady on her rifle, simply listened to the wind, feeling its patterns, its rhythm. The crowd held its breath as both competitors prepared to take their shot, the air thick with suspense. The moment stretched out, a heartbeat in eternity, as Jane focused all her senses, ready to make her move. For a brief second, everything fell silent. Then, the shots rang out, two distinct sounds echoing across the arena, as the final test began in earnest. The arena seemed to hold its breath as Jane and Zarek lined up their shots. The wind howled like a distant beast, its force tugging at their clothes and rattling loose objects. Darkness crept over the arena, and the moving barriers, massive, metal walls on robotic tracks, shifted in erratic patterns, leaving only brief windows of opportunity. The final round was designed to test not just skill, but nerve and instinct, the ultimate gauntlet for any marksman. Jane's eyes narrowed, focusing not on the target but on the gaps between the barriers, predicting their movements. The wind whipped around her, but she seemed to move with it, as if she were a part of its chaotic dance. She steadied her breathing, letting the rhythm of her heartbeat guide her timing. Zarek's rifle hummed with energy, its advanced sensors compensating for the darkness and wind, calculating trajectories faster than any organic mind could. He tightened his grip, his eyes darting between the barriers and the distant target. He had trained for moments like this, relying on his superior technology and the perfect alignment of machine and flesh. But now, for the first time, doubt crept into his mind. This human, this Jane Carter, had already proven she was no ordinary opponent. "I won't let her beat me," he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible above the wind's roar. The crowd was silent, every spectator on edge, as if they could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on the arena. The announcer's voice, usually loud and exuberant, was now a mere whisper, tense with anticipation. "Final shots, ready, aim." Jane's finger hovered over the trigger, her mind clear and focused. She felt the wind's pulse, the barrier's rhythm, and her own steady heartbeat all aligning in a single, perfect moment. Time seemed to slow down, the noise of the arena fading into a distant hum. Zarek's eyes widened, and he fired first, the beam of energy slicing through the darkness. But just as he pulled the trigger, a sudden gust of wind slammed into the arena, throwing his shot off by a fraction. The beam glanced off the edge of a moving barrier, ricocheting harmlessly into the distance. Jane didn't hesitate. The moment the wind shifted, she adjusted her aim with an almost imperceptible movement, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew through the narrow opening between two barriers, threading the needle with impossible precision. A collective gasp rippled through the audience as the shot found its mark, hitting the target dead center. A heartbeat passed. Then, the arena erupted in cheers, a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. Jane exhaled slowly, lowering her rifle with a calm satisfaction. The tension in her shoulders eased, and a small, victorious smile tugged at the corners of her lips. Zarek stared at the target, disbelief etched across his face. His rifle, once a symbol of his superiority, now felt like dead weight in his hands. He turned to Jane, his expression a mix of frustration and something else, something that looked almost like respect. You read the wind," he said, his voice strained. "You didn't even use your scope." Jane met his gaze, her smile widening just a fraction. "Sometimes the most advanced tool you have is right here," she replied, tapping a finger to her temple. "You just have to learn to trust it." Zarek opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time in his career, he was speechless. The crowd continued to cheer, chanting Jane's name, their voices blending into a single, powerful wave of sound. The announcer's voice finally broke through the noise, filled with excitement and awe. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner! Corporal Jane Carter of Earth has done the impossible. She has defeated the galaxy's top marksman in a stunning display of skill and intuition." Jane stepped forward, acknowledging the applause with a modest nod. She could feel the eyes of the entire galaxy on her, a mix of disbelief, admiration, and curiosity. For many, she was an enigma, a human who had outperformed the best with nothing but an old rifle and an uncanny ability to read the environment. As she descended from the platform, Zarek moved to block her path. The crowd hushed, sensing another confrontation. For a moment, it seemed like he might challenge her, refuse to accept the outcome. But then, slowly, he extended one of his hands. "You've earned this," he said, his tone begrudging but sincere. "I underestimated you. I won't make that mistake again." Jane took his hand, shaking it firmly. "Good. Because next time, I'll be ready for you." A flicker of a smile crossed Zarek's face, a hint of respect mingling with his frustration. "You humans, always full of surprises." As Jane turned to leave, a group of officials approached, their expressions a mixture of formal politeness and guarded interest. The lead official, a tall figure with a flowing robe and a solemn face, stepped forward. "Corporal Carter," he began, his voice calm but carrying a note of authority. "The Galactic Council would like to speak with you. Your performance today has raised some questions, and we believe there is much we could learn from you." Jane studied the official's face, searching for any sign of hidden motives. "I'm just a soldier," she replied cautiously. "I'm not sure what more there is to say." The official's eyes narrowed slightly, a thin smile forming. "Perhaps more than you realize. But that is a discussion for another time. For now, you should enjoy your victory. It is well deserved." Jane nodded, accepting his words but filing away the encounter for later consideration. As she walked away, the cheers of the crowd still echoing in her ears, she felt a surge of pride in something else, a sense of purpose. Today, she had proven what a human could do. Tomorrow, who knew what challenges would come next? The arena lights dimmed as she stepped into the shadows, leaving behind the echoes of her victory and stepping forward into the unknown, ready for whatever lay ahead. Jane Carter found herself in a small, dimly lit chamber deep within the bowels of the arena complex. The walls were bare metal, cool to the touch, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and machinery. A single light above cast a harsh circle on the floor, illuminating the sparse furnishings, a metal chair, a small table, and a viewport that revealed the endless expanse of space beyond. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the station's life support systems. She sat alone, her hands resting on the table in front of her. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and the same official who had approached her after the competition stepped in, his flowing robe trailing behind him like a shadow. He moved with deliberate grace, his expression unreadable. "Corporal Carter," he began, his voice smooth and even. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us on such short notice." Jane nodded, her gaze steady. "I didn't think I had much of a choice." The official's lips curled into a thin smile. "Perhaps not. But I assure you, our intentions are purely inquisitive. Your performance today was exceptional. We are keen to understand more about your methods." Jane leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "My methods? I didn't do anything special. Just used what I've been trained to do." The official tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Modesty is a virtue, Corporal, but false modesty does you no favors here. Your ability to read environmental conditions, to anticipate the movement of the barriers and the wind, was beyond what we have observed from even our most advanced marksmen. And you did it all without technological augmentation." Jane's expression remained neutral, but her mind raced. What were they really after? "It's just experience," she said slowly. "On Earth, you learn to adapt to your environment. It's how you survive." The official nodded thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving her face. "Survival, yes, a quality your species has demonstrated time and again. But there is something more, isn't there? Something innate, an instinctive understanding that goes beyond mere training." Jane hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She sensed that this conversation was more than just a debriefing. There was a tension in the air, a subtle undercurrent that hinted at deeper motives. "What are you getting at?" she asked cautiously. The official leaned forward slightly, his expression intent. "We believe your skills could be of great value, not just in competition, but in real-world applications. There are situations that require the kind of intuition and adaptability you have displayed. Situations where technology may fail, but human ingenuity prevails." Jane felt a prickle of unease at his words. "Are you asking me to join some kind of special unit?" The official's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing so formal, at least not yet. We are simply exploring possibilities. We believe there is much that can be learned from your unique perspective. The galaxy is vast, Corporal Carter, and there are many challenges that lie ahead. Challenges that require more than just technology and advanced weaponry." Jane weighed his words carefully. "And what do I get out of this? If you're looking for something from me, I need to know what I'm signing up for." The official's smile faded slightly, replaced by a more serious expression. "Knowledge, Corporal. Access to resources and information beyond your wildest imagination. The chance to be at the forefront of a new era, where the strengths of all species are combined for the greater good." Jane considered this. The idea of learning more about the galaxy, about the other species and their technologies, was tempting. But there was something in the official's demeanor, a subtle arrogance, that made her wary. "And if I refuse?" The official's expression remained calm, but there was a hint of steel in his voice. "That would be unfortunate. But we would respect your decision, of course. However, I would urge you to consider the opportunity carefully. You have already proven that humans have much to offer. This is your chance to show just how much." Jane met his gaze evenly. "I'll think about it." The official nodded, standing up and smoothing his robe. "Very well. Take your time. But not too much time. The galaxy moves quickly, and opportunities like this do not come often." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Remember, Corporal Carter, the future is always uncertain. It is the choices we make that shape it." With that, he left the room, the door sliding shut behind him with a soft hiss. Jane remained seated, her mind racing with the possibilities. She had come here to prove herself, to show that humans were more than just relics of an old world. But now, she found herself on the precipice of something much larger, something that could change the course of her life, and possibly the fate of humanity in the galaxy. She stood and walked over to the viewport, staring out at the endless sea of stars. She had always been a soldier, always known her path. But now, that path seemed less certain. She felt a mix of excitement and trepidation, a sense of standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. Whatever came next, Jane knew one thing for sure: she would face it head-on, with the same determination and skill that had brought her this far. She turned away from the window, a new resolve settling in her chest. The galaxy was wide, and she was ready to see just how far she could go. As she walked out of the chamber, she felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her, but also the thrill of the unknown. Whatever the future held, she was ready to meet it on her own terms. The door slid shut behind her with a final, decisive click, sealing away the past and opening up the endless possibilities of tomorrow.